So, hi. Art has been kicking my ass for 2 months and making me want to redesign one of my main OCs. I've done several videos where I put her in other series and vaguely talk about the plot that I have planned for her. So how about we actually flesh out said plot, because currently it's a bit of a nightmare. So here are my main issues with the current state of Vine. First things first, she kind of exists as a side character for a Minecraft roleplay, which has I promise I'll finish eventually. I'm just really tired, guys, please. It's one thing at a time, alright? I can barely get out that part 2 to the Athmo video. Just one thing at a time. The other problem is that I have a vague idea for what happens to her, but never thought about it for more than like 5 minutes. So I think it's time that we actually think about it. So, redesigning Vine. Originally I was just gonna do this on my own, but I decided that it would make a pretty good video, so here we are. Let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, my art style has become a lot more simple for this drawing. I have 2 main reasons for this. One, for this, I wanted for it to be the most simple version of the outfit and the design it could be. Just so I could, if I want to add more details in the future, I could, but I want to keep these sort of ideas and these sort of details prominent. That's sort of my thinking. Number 2, my way more complex and detailed art style. As much as I love it and as much as I love doing it, I realized that it's just not sustainable for me to do it for videos or in general. I haven't drawn for 2 months. The only drawings I've been making are those little doodles that I post. You might have seen a few of them. I've posted a few. Here's a few of them. But outside of that, I rarely have drawn. Not until like the past 2 weeks have I actually been drawing real things. Here's a few things that I've drawn, but it's all been really simple because unfortunately I learned that spending more than an hour on an illustration genuinely drives me nuts. I don't know what it is, I don't know why it is, but spending more than an hour on one thing just drives me up a wall in a way that doing my normal art style just isn't sustainable. As much as I love the beautiful illustrations I made in the past, and I probably will make more of these in the future, they take me out. They are really long to do. They cause me to not be able to draw for days, weeks, just a really long time. I did 2 of them back in October, and it took me out up until now. So, as you can tell, doing these is not really great for my art. And another thing is I realized that I don't really care to do insane detail. I like looking at it on other people's illustrations. I think that's the thing I recently realized, that despite the fact that I like looking at certain things, doesn't mean I like drawing them, which has been a weird lesson I needed to learn about art. Because I like looking at a lot of things. I really like really detailed, beautiful anime illustrations. But I realized I don't particularly enjoy drawing them as much as I thought I did. Which kind of opened up my eyes to, the fact that maybe I should switch things up. Anyways, back to Vine. Her main thing that has been consistent from prior to this rewrite and everything like that is that she is kind of the goddess of love. The thing is though, yes, they are gods. They're more like manifestations. It's really, they're people, but they're not. For all intents and purposes, and to keep it simple, she's the little goddess of love. I love her. And she exists on a kind of interdimensional council of several other members, and she's the 3rd member to exist on the council. This is not currently relevant. This is not the story we're covering, because this story gets covered by Sale Archives and just a bunch of other things. But I realized that she herself has her own story. She still exists in her own universe as her own person. So what's that like? I wanted to embody a few of the, general styling choices that are used throughout, traditional Slavic clothes, because, I myself am Eastern European, so she gets put into that camp too. Yippee. And with that, I've always assumed that the area she comes from, the kind of universe she comes from, is really cold, but I thought it would be more interesting that it gets progressively colder as it goes on. There's 2 main things that I think I gotta explain before I go any further. First things first is that Vine suffers from something called rot, which is a illness that usually affects a universe. This is a lot more easier to explain in Sale Archives, but basically, sometimes when the person that's meant to represent the universe, Vine in this instance, does something that's so against what they are meant to be doing, their universe gets infected with a certain rot so that they can start over. But instead of letting her people rot, she decided to take it on herself, and is currently having what basically is frostbite take over her. That's kind of the vibe. But as it takes over her, the universe is getting a lot colder. The area and the place she's in is just getting progressively colder and colder and colder. It's like a fictional version of Earth, but because it's progressively getting colder, people are having to adapt to this. Basically, the more sick she gets, the colder it gets around her, and the more the world is plunged into sort of an ice age. So now you might be asking, what is this grand sin she committed for the world to start to rot and eventually herself to rot? The version of Earth that this takes place on is very limited with resources. Not everyone can have many resources, if any, and the version of Earth that's like in this universe is kind of still stuck in medieval times. It's kind of like a fantasy setting, if you get me. So people are fighting for resources, and her job as the goddess of love was to ensure that people don't get too out of hand in terms of hating each other and fighting for resources. And it's basically just a punishment for not doing her job for what has now been over 1,000 years. And the main reason she's allowing this conflict to ensue and still persist is because of her weird liking for the family, and especially the current heir to the throne, for the people who are currently inciting this entire conflict by hoarding resources. Because unfortunately, what she is, at the end of the day, is also her undoing. She is the goddess of love, and love is her current undoing, to the point where she's made a warmonger immortal. Now, I don't have all the kinks ironed out when it comes to this world and what's going on within it. This is sort of like a rough draft for a bigger, better version of the story. So things might change in the future. I might add things, I might omit things, it might change in the future, but the current idea I have when it comes to the actual world that she lives in. But the main idea I have for the conflict currently going on is that this world has magic. It's a kind of fantasy-esque, medieval-esque setting where there are magical beings. And for those magical beings to be able to still perform magic and still almost exist, because there's a few beings that basically exist solely running on magic, but they need to be able to be near magic. I don't have a name for this yet. I'll figure it out later. This is a lot of I'll figure out things later. The main way you can acquire, keep, and store magic is through these sort of hot springs. Now, the way magic works in this universe is way more like electrolytes than like mystical beings. It's a lot more like it's a property that can be found in certain things, and these hot springs have an abundance of it, to the point where people come there and dunk their children into these hot springs in hopes that their child is able to gain magical powers, or in hopes that it will cure an illness. And as much as these hot springs are necessary for magic, they're not a cure-all. These things are not a magical solution to every single problem, they just store magic. Unfortunately for everyone in this world, these magical hot springs tend to mostly spring up in the north, meaning that people who already live there and kingdoms that already existed in the north have a way higher chance of finding them first. And a long, long time ago, a family of royals, or emperors, or whatever the fuck, I haven't figured out what their official title is yet, they decided that the way they're gonna gain power over the world is by utilizing the fact that they have the most hot springs in their, kingdom currently, and they're gonna limit people's access to not only the hot springs that they have, but they're gonna start taking them from other, countries, or even just finding them on their own, and deciding that, only we can use them now. You don't get to use them, and if you want to use them, well, you're gonna have to pay up. And it becomes to a point where only a certain select few people can even gain access to these hot springs that people need. If you're a magic user, it's almost that you need it to survive, because without it, you start depleting all the magic from you, and you could die. But because everything that contains water from these hot springs is so expensive and hard to come by, you're left scrounging and trying to find other ways to replenish it. When Vine manifested into this world, her main thing was that she was meant to actually free the people from this rule. She was meant to actually be able to take down this tyrannical rule and finally be able to let people have access to the resources they need. Now, Vine isn't an utter dumbass. She knows what's going on, but she's just trying to turn the other cheek because the person she loves the most is one of the people in charge of keeping up this tyrannical rule over a resource that people need. And when the rot starts manifesting in the world, she decides that she'll finally do something about the fact that she's been doing jack shit for years, and she decides to take it on herself and is kind of slowly dying because of it. So Ambrosia is interesting because she's one of the only few characters that I actually have an idea for when it comes to characters that, you know, exist within the Vine universe. That being, of course, she's the warmonger that Vine is a little in love with. The way her family is able to keep up this whole charade that they should be the only ones in charge of these hot springs is by saying that they're not keeping them from you. They're ensuring that you can get a safe and okay version of them because the real ones are too powerful, and if just an average person were to be dunked into it, they would die or be turned into some evil monster, and we don't want that happening. Therefore, we should be able to control them because, well, you're not gonna be able to figure it out. Ambrosia ascends to the throne pretty early. She's roughly 18 or 19 when it happens because her aunt, who was the current queen at the time, is assassinated. And having grown up sheltered and not fully understanding why people are so mad at her family for just wanting to protect them, she takes a pretty easy influence from the ones around her. Roughly around the same time, their current magic advisor is sent to war due to the fact that he didn't want to serve under the new queen. So Vine, at the time, going around telling people that, oh yeah, she's just a silly little mage, she doesn't know what's going on, is hired as the new magic advisor going under the moniker of Marine. So despite the fact that Vine was literally manifested into the world to end this conflict, she now works directly under the people who are inciting it and are the reason that it's going on. Over time, Vine starts to slowly kind of ignore the whole thing of having to bring love and unity to the world, because slowly she starts to fall in love with the current monarch. Now, as much as Vine would love to go, oh, but she's so smart and funny, and she's just misunderstood, I can fix her. Sure, Ambrosia believes what she is doing is right. That's what she was, you know, taught about the world, is that, yeah, they need to protect the magical little hot springs because, well, the people, they would hurt themselves if they used it. If everyone had access to this, then who knows what would happen. I mean, think of all the evil people who would want to use them for evil. Or even the thought process of, well, if we don't control them, then someone else is going to. Her entire life, Ambrosia has been trying to rationalize the violence not only has her family enacted on people, but now she enacts on people to keep this resource all to her, basically herself. And sure, it's a little true that in the past people have used, you know, this hot spring and the magic from it to become more powerful and then enact. Sure, people have used the magic from the hot springs to create weapons, but it's not like they're not themselves using it to create other weapons or even just to ensure that people can't get access to this resource because, well, they don't want other people to get access to it. People all throughout the world are left scrounging and finding any essences of magic. They're hunting animals that have magic almost to death because there's no other way to get it. Anything that has actual water from the hot springs is incredibly expensive and really hard to get your hands on. There are mages in this world who will sell their own blood because that's one of the few, like, replenishing sources of magic in this world. At this point, the war for magic has been going on for hundreds of years, and Ambrosia just isn't dying. Ambrosia's human. As far as anyone's aware, she's not some sort of ancient wizard. Sure, a few powerful mages have lived up until like 200, but Ambrosia is going on 700 and no one can explain it. But that's because Ambrosia's immortality isn't tied to these hot springs. Ambrosia's immortality was granted by Vine. There's a certain conditional immortality Vine can provide to certain people that is just tied to the fact that she's a god. That being, as long as Vine is alive, this person will not age or die. They can get incredibly wounded to the point where normal people would die, but they won't die until Vine is gone. Now, the reason Vine gave Ambrosia immortality was because at one point Ambrosia was mortally wounded. She was on the brink of death, and Vine didn't want to lose what basically was her only friend, and decided to take a drastic measure. When the rot starts consuming Vine, for the first time in hundreds of years, Ambrosia starts to age again. And this is causing Ambrosia, who was for the longest time not only immortal, but now ageless. And there's no new hot springs popping up, and because the world is getting progressively colder and colder, the hot springs are starting to lose a bit of magic as time goes on. And they're losing magic fast. It's almost concerning to most of the people who are in charge because for years and years and years, they've been relying on this as a way of curing their soldiers, of curing any illness, and furthermore supplying magic to themselves. Suddenly, certain hot springs can no longer even fix a broken arm. Where just a few years ago, a drop could fix several broken bones. Suddenly, the same mages who at one point were selling their own blood because it contained magic were now being used as power sources for the hot springs. Eventually, when Vine finally does die, all the hot springs are no longer magical. They've lost all the power they had. But in her wake is left a very large lake that is refusing to freeze, and on this lake is a singular boat that just has a crying baby on it. Okay, this is just a little segment I'm adding in as a way of explaining the council and the whole thing with Vine being a god and a manifestation of creation, because I didn't explain it, but it is a little bit relevant because it's also relevant on how she's able to grant immortality. But while I explain that, please enjoy these concept sketches of how the Ra is spreading throughout. So the Heavenly Council is a 6-seat council of a bunch of gods from different universes, and they're all manifestations of greater creation, which is the creation of the multiverse. He makes these guys, and he makes them in his image. Anytime a universe has a bit of too much conflict, usually one of these manifestations is created and sent there as a way of trying to fix that conflict. There's technically more than 6 versions of creation, but none of them are powerful enough to actually join the council. Now, this rule does not apply for the first seat of the council, which is Baal, and he's the first to be created. He only exists within this almost like crosspoint in the multiverse, where just a giant archive of every multiverse that goes under the god of creation. Now, the rest of them do actually follow the same rules as Vine of being manifested into a universe because something is going down and it needs to be fixed. The second seat of the council is Asmodee, the third seat of the council is Vine, the 4th seat is Fosaloris, the 5th seat is Ammon, and the 6th seat is Belith. Jesus Christ, like a tongue twister. One of them is also a type of shooter, with Vine having a sniper rifle. Now, Vine is the only person in her universe at the time where she is alive that has access to guns. Her successor Paimon, who's the god of war, and we're not going to get into it because that's for a different video, but he will eventually get them replicated. Now, Vine is the only girl on the council, and that mostly just comes from the fact that originally this was all a joke for the Sale archives. Let's just say they all look very similar. And Vine, I just wanted to draw a girl. That's it. That's the only reason she isn't a dude like the rest of them. I just wanted to draw a girl. One thing with them having access to these archives, and it's the reason that Vine is able to grant conditional immortality, is because within the archives they can set a rule within their universe. If they go in there, they write it down, and it gets approved, they can have it as a rule. Vine had to go back to the archive and basically made it a law of the universe where as long as Vine is alive, Ambrosia will live. So that's kind of how that works. By the way, Ambrosia is still alive post-Vine dying. She's just suddenly aging again. By the time Vine dies, she's closer to 40 than she is at the start where she's like 20. And that would be the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate it because you had to sit through so much of me yapping. Oh my god, I rambled on for so long. But if you want to see the final ref sheets, they're going to be on my Twitter and my Bluesky, so make sure to follow me there if you want to see that. Plus, I post other art that I make, so you should check it out. I know I was gone for 2 months, and I know I kept saying, oh, video soon, and then never posting. I promise I'm still working on videos. I'm really tired, and it's been really hard to work on things, but hopefully I'm gonna get back into like the swing of things very soon. Again, thank you so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, what you think I should name like the kingdom, because I still don't have a name for it. It's been a while, I just can't decide on one, so if you have any suggestions, let me know. And with that, I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye!